Welcome to the Political Ferret Show. New content will be uploaded every Wednesday and Sunday. This video was financed by my Patreons. Thank you for making the change possible. In the aftermath of the imprisonment of Martin Sellner, Stug Sachsenhammer made a quite funny video about that, and the funny part was that he pointed out that Austria is run now by a socialist. And I wondered why. I mean, he told some weeks ago after our election about our center-right wing government. So how does he come to the idea that Austria is right now run by a socialist? And then I remembered, Van der Bellen, okay, everything is clear. He knows that the Austrian president is far left. But he also seems to know that the government is center-right. So it seems there is a need to tell again some Americans how the Austrian system works, and only in a nutshell, because it's a way too unimportant nation and it's a way too complicated system, so we stay absolutely in a nutshell there, okay? So I will use on the screen the German terms, but I will call them by their English counterpart names. So it could be a little bit confusing, but I'm absolutely sure you get it. So, the Austrian people elect the president. What does the president do? Well, the president does, when another election comes up, and this is the election not for the president but for the government, give to the party that came pretty much first the job to form a government. So the president gives the chancellor, the Bundeskanzler, the job to create a government. This is what he does. He creates then a government. What is the next step? The president approves of this government, and that's about it. That's about it. This is not a government. You have on the left side the government. It's the head of the government is the Chancellor, and below it it's the government. And the president has no real saying in the state of the affairs of the government. He is still in charge of the military. That's one thing. So, and what is his job in this system? This is more or less a parallel structured system. When the government fucks up, the president can sack the government and can reinstate new elections and reinstate a new election cycle. So when there is something seriously wrong with the government because they are completely dysfunctional, he can sack the whole system and said, okay, we reboot the whole system. Why? Because we had in the past exactly this problem. We had in the times of the First Republic, we had the system that the party with the most electoral votes had the job to form a government, and then they did not do that because reasons, and it was a dysfunctional system. So now we have the president in charge, and the president manages more or less that the government does what it should do, but he's not head of the government. And there is another thing that comes up all the time, and this is the question, how in the hell can two parties form a government in Austria? Well, we have more or less 5 parties right now. 2 will become so strong that they together are above the threshold of 50%, and they will then govern together. How do they do that? Well, this is exactly this job of the Chancellor to form a government. So these 2 parties then agree to a paper, more or less to a contract, what the government will do. This is some 100 pages long and starts with some 100 pages that states that they will be the best government and they will govern for the people and blah 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 blah, and they are so much better than everything else. And then there are some points where they say, okay, we will raise the taxes and we will take some stuff from you, and other things what governments do normally. So they have a contract, and the 2 parties have to do more or less what this contract says for the next some years. So these 2 parties for this time being act pretty much as one party. It's more or less like your left and right wing of the Republicans and Democrats and so on, where they always fight inside and say, okay, if you want that, I give you that, and so on. And they do that pretty much in the beginning. They fight that out in the beginning for the major points. There are some things then when, let's say, I don't know, hurricane strikes, which does not often happens in Austria, the government will then act based on what they seem fit for the moment, and then there can happen some infighting in between the parties, because the one say we do this and the other say we do that, and but more or less this works pretty fine. The other parties who are not in the government right now form up the opposition, so you have more or less, and it is surprising how often left-wingers and right-wingers are pretty much say the same thing when they can push the government around. So it's pretty funny to be fair. So well, yeah, that's the thing. It's already been a little bit longer than I wanted to do that. So the thing is, the President of Austria is not part of the government. This is something you have to understand. The President of Austria is not part of the government, but he is in charge to form the government, or to give one guy the job to form the government, and he's the guy on the red button to reboot the system. He can't crush it, he can take over the power for a very limited amount of time in a state of absolute emergency, but this happens not all too often, and if it would happen, well, you have a riot on your hand. And the government is still in power. If we're talking about the guys with guns, the government is in power of all the things like police and so on. So if you say, okay, there is a potential for a civil war between the Bundeskanzler on the one side and the president on the other side, meaning the army against the police forces or something like that, the systems below the structure have a living for themselves, so they won't do that. So if you fear that the far left Austrian president now says, oh, we crash the government and we take over and install a socialist republic or something like that, it won't happen. By the way, socialist, the definition of socialist was one thing when Sticks said that Austria is run by socialists. He said, was he really going so deep? Or perhaps was he watching one of my videos? Because from my point of view, and compared to the American system, all of our parties are social democrats. They all believe in the democratic process, and they all believe in shifting money around. I mean, our far right, our so-called far right FPÖ, they have on their ad social justice. I mean, our far right would be considered in America pretty left wing. On the other hand, I was listening to some of the stuff that Bernie Sanders said, and I tell you, what he told in some of this stuff would be considered far right over here. So this is also one of the semantics here. But again, the President of Austria is not head of the government. This is the thing that is important in all these issues, and this is the point where I stop bubbling around. So thanks for watching, like, share and subscribe, and have a wonderful time.